Therapy Cable Live. And now we're going to learn some more about a really relevant topic we keep hearing about over and over again, unfortunately, terrorism. With me today is Professor James Feldkamp. He's a professor of theory and politics of terrorism at George Mason University. Let's welcome to the show, Professor Feldkamp. Welcome, Professor.
Hey, thanks, fellas. Great to be here.
So this is a topic, like I said, it just doesn't seem to go away, unfortunately. I really wish I could say it would go away in the next couple of years, but I don't think so.
Yeah, unfortunately not.
So let's do this. I know we want to get a little bit of a historical background of why people would even join one of these terrorist groups.
Well, I guess we can always start back, and there was once a philosopher named Emily Durkheim in France who came up with this concept about anomie, which is basically when societal changes or society no longer provides the structure for your environment. And we can see this happening time and time again. And a classic example will be, globalization. After Desert Storm, the whole old world order of the Cold War collapsed basically, and the United States came out on top. But we also had globalization. We had all this opportunity, and so American values and American technology advanced around the globe. So like I said, everybody wanted to buy McDonald's. And so when there's a lot of cultures that can't handle this kind of buffeting, and a lot of people resort back to religion in this case, when we're talking about ISIS or Al-Qaeda, to figure out why did the world turn upside down. And we can see this happening time and time again. In the Industrial Revolution, same thing happened. That's where we had the rise of the anarchists, because the world was changing so rapidly, so a lot of cultures could not understand or could not cope. Americans, we're different because we're very capitalistic, and we're used to having things. We're very flexible in our culture and our lifestyle that we can handle a lot of this buffeting, as I call it. But a lot of cultures can't. So we had, the anarchists, and that came out with the Industrial Revolution, and after World War I, when that whole order collapsed, then we had the rise of anti-imperialism, and then after World War II, the whole new order collapsed again, and then we had the rise of the Cold War and the leftists and the Marxists, and the Weather Underground, FARC, the Red Brigade, all these terrorist groups that were Marxists in general that were out there trying to destroy capitalist society. And now, after we call this the fourth wave, is religious terrorism. Kind of happened after Desert Storm. Initially, it started with Al-Qaeda back in Afghanistan in 1979, because there was three seminal events that happened in Islam at that time. One was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviets, a godless communist country, invaded a Muslim country. And then we had the Ayatollahs, took over Iran from the Shah. And then we had the attack of the Grand Mosque in Mecca, which killed about 40,000 people. But that was a Salafi kind of puritanical organization that wanted to cleanse the Grand Mosque of all these apostates. And so we had these three things all happen in 1979. And,
geez.
From there, sorry, go ahead.
So, geez, that's a lot of stuff in 1 year.
Yeah, it did.
Wow.
And what happened after that, then, we supported, anybody that was fighting the communists in Afghanistan, and so the Soviets lost. The Mujahideen that were there convinced themselves, or rightfully so, that, they had, defeated a godless communist organization, and God provided for them. And so all these people that had gone to Afghanistan, became radicalized fighting the Soviets, went back to their home countries. Now we fast forward, then in 1990, Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait, and the Saudis were worried about the fact that Iraq had the fourth largest military in the world and a heck of a tank army, and they were worried about Saddam Hussein turning south and going right into the oil field. So they invited us to come on over and protect him, but we said yes. But of course, Osama bin Laden saw that as infidels occupying the Holy Land. And after he even offered to send his mujahideen to save the Saudis said, no thanks, we'll take Uncle Sam. And so that's why he generated that concept that, infidels were in the Holy Lands and they should be expunged, and that's why he declared war on us. And then you can just see the progression after Desert Storm. We had the World Trade Center #1 that happened in 1993. Then we had the Khobar Towers in 95. Then we had the embassies in 98. Then we had the coal in 2000, and now we had the in 9/11, which is basically you just see the progression, how more complicated and more deadly they became, and that's what happened.
Now, do we also see a lot of social inequality that grew and a lot of people that became poor during those years as well? A lot more of those individuals. Is that another thing that helped drive their success in being able to recruit people because you had so many more people who were in poverty?
No. That's a false argument to say. If you look back at all the history, that it's not poverty that drives people to terrorism. It's people that are politically repressed, more or less. That's what makes our country great, actually, is we have the ability, the pendulum swings left and right, but everybody has a voice because we have a representative democracy. A lot of countries don't have that. A lot of apostate regimes, a lot of dictatorial regimes don't allow the people to express themselves. And so when everybody says, well, it's because of poverty and all that, that's not the case at all. And you can look at the empirical evidence, there's none. It's basically people that are pretty smart that have a political agenda in order to go advance it. And that's where they use terrorism. And that's what I teach in my class is terrorism is basically violence or the threat of violence against civilians or people who can't protect themselves for a political purpose. And so if you have those three tenets, that's basically what boils down to terrorism. And so it's not so much poverty, it's about people that want to express a political statement. And then they'll find their justifications, whatever the case may be. They can say they're poor and disenfranchised, or it's American imperialism, or it's the Israelis, or whatever the case may be. But the bottom line is they are political actors that want to advance an agenda.
So off of that note, then Syria could be a breeding ground in the sense of fighting back with Assad's oppression.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you can see this, too, what happened with Libya. That whole thing, it collapsed. And, we in America, and once again, I always plug America because we are kind of raised with freedom comes responsibilities, and we're kind of bred, it's kind of bred in our DNA about democracy and all that stuff. But when you break something, nature abhors a vacuum, and something is going to fill that vacuum. And that's what happened when we invaded Iraq is, we had to surge and we calmed down all these terrorist activities, and we started building up these institutions that people can have faith in, except we pulled out too early, and that basically collapsed because Maliki became, an autocrat and purged all the army of, sane or capable military people, put on all his Shia stooges. And so when they came up against ISIS, all these guys turned around and ran, and so ISIS started broadcasting the fact that we're a real good organization and we're going to create a caliphate and come to us. And so they were very, very good at broadcasting and sending out a message in which to recruit. And they're great on Twitter, they're great on all this social media, and they just took advantage of it. And that's where we are today.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, they are too good at that social media. It seems interesting right now, and maybe it's just me. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But it looks like they've really been out of the media lately. We heard a lot about ISIS about 2 months ago, obviously after all the attacks and everything. And now they're kind of like gone. I mean, you rarely see them. They're mostly, everybody's talking about more about Syria or Russia or the economy or Trump. I mean, most of the time he takes up the airwaves. It can be a good thing, I guess, if you have him instead of ISIS. Is that hurting them, you think, in regards to recruitment? They're not really being visible at all.
Well, yes, it would be hurting them. But you got to remember, they're broadcasting in multiple languages. Their top three languages right now are Arabic, Russian, and English.
Russian?
And so because the Caucasus is a whole nother problem that is going on. That the Caucasus Emirates, another terrorist organization that's been fighting for the independence of Chechnya.
Chechnya, right.
And so you have these, it's worldwide. It's not just the United States. But, their social media, they're really working good on that. We're taking it to them a little bit more since after the Paris attacks. But they are still more or less an Islamic state. And I say that because they do have definable borders. They have an economy, although it's a black market economy, it's still an economy. They have a rule of law, even though we don't like it, Sharia law. But so those are some of the elements that create a society or a state. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to consolidate that state, but also have basically state-sponsored terrorism, having independents going on out doing, onesies, twosies because of their ideology. And now in the United States, we've got 1,000 cases going on. The FBI's got 1,000 cases of people that have become radicalized through social media. And, just because they're kind of quiet right now doesn't mean they're not active, because just because the press doesn't pick it up doesn't mean they're not out there.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to make sure for everybody, Professor Feldkamp was a special agent for the FBI. So he knows his stuff, as you can tell by just listening to him. So, Professor, we talked about the ISIS recruitment a little bit in regards to social media. We're showing a video clip here of one of their training videos. They have all these guys running around with guns, acting like they're Navy SEAL dudes. Do you think that's really effective? Does that motivate people to want to feel like they're part of some kind of special group?
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely correct in what you say that. And you can look back and not to equate the same thing, but Americans are, human beings are social creatures, and we want to belong. And that's one of the things that I talk about in my class when we talk about sociology is that, why do people join the military? Why do people join gangs? Why do people join fraternities or sororities or the Boy Scouts? Is that people want to belong to something. And so you have these dispossessed people, second or third generation, immigrants that are caught between, American way of life and the European or their Arabic way of life. And so they think going out there and doing something like that will provide an identity, as it were. And we see this happening a lot. That back in the old days when we had people coming and immigrating to America, like if you left Ireland, you'd be gone. You could write a letter or something. It takes
Right.
6, 7, 8 weeks for that letter to reach, your family back in Ireland, and then for them to reply. Now it's instantaneous. So a lot of these people hear and feel the grievances that all these people are talking on the internet about. And so they want to become a part of something. And so this recruitment is very intoxicating. And a lot of people are trying to get out there, and they want to do something, they want to be part of something.
That's
and
amazing.
Until they get there and they realize it's not as much fun as they thought. But that's the way it works. And that's the whole thing about, we talk about identity and why do people do what they want to do, and how they want to be a part of something that's greater than themselves.
We have about 3 or 4 minutes, so we're going to pressure you here. The operations of a terrorist group. You alluded to it a little bit earlier. It almost runs like a corporation, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, well.
Or a company.
Yes and no. Yeah, nowadays it's not as much as an organization as it used to be. I mean, it used to be very hierarchical, like Al-Qaeda, like Osama bin Laden ran everything. And now with social media and everything, they've pushed down, and so more people are doing more independent things with the same ideology. So look at it as, with the best way to good analogy is
Like a spider web?
Well, basically, pardon?
Like a spider web?
It's like a spider web. It's like communism. You had Mao's communism, you had Russian communism, but you had this ideology, this overarching ideology, and people would take that ideology and morph it to the justification of what they need to do. And so that's why we saw with San Bernardino. We saw what happened in Paris a couple of times. People will take this ideology and say, well, I'm doing the right thing for jihad, for Allah. And this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to go do it. And we're going to go out and kill onesie-twosies, where we used to have Al-Qaeda was, spectacular attacks. And, that's a concept called Faustus, which is kind of after Che Guevara, which, if you have this huge, great, catastrophic event like 9/11, then people will rally behind you, and that will be kind of the catalyst in which you to overthrow all these apostate regimes and create the caliphate. And that's what Al-Qaeda wanted to do, and now ISIS did something different. They said, we're just going to stick here in the Middle East, and we're going to create a caliphate out of whole cloth. And since Iraq is pretty unstable and Syria has just gone, out the window, there's a lot of vacuum out there that we can take advantage of, and that's what they've been doing.
Well, we're going to ask you now to do the impossible, Professor. We got about a minute and a half. Can you give us some solutions to get rid of these guys?
Oh, yeah. First of all, what we have got to do is get rid of political correctness. That's the bottom line. We fought the same. We have fought in this before. We fought against the Japanese when they had an ideology, and they used suicide bombers. We called them kamikazes back then. But we had to get rid of that ideology. We did the same thing with Russia. To get rid of that ideology, we went into a campaign saying America's better than Russia, and we won that. right now we can't talk about anything bad because we might offend people, and that political correctness is getting us into a box. You know, you got to use the military. You got to use all aspects. We call it the dime theory. You know, defense, intelligence, you know, economy, and money, basically to help perpetuate and to help solidify these countries. But right now, we can't talk about what the problem is because we're afraid we might offend people. And that's, you know, we want to talk about politics. That's why a lot of people are supporting Trump, because he's talking about, you know, things nobody wants to talk about. So if you want to stop this, what you got to do is get rid of PC, fight it on the ideological plane, knowing that this is not the way. And if you're going to go to ISIS or you're going to, you know, engage in terrorist activities, there's only one way. One thing's going to happen, that you're going to lose. But we don't do that anymore because we always talk about political correctness and this isn't really Islam and trying to justify or tamp down what has happened because we don't want to offend people. And I have a lot of Muslims in my class too, and when I always talk about not being politically correct, it opens up a good dialogue for a lot of people, and everybody kind of enjoys it because for the last 20 years we've been walking around on eggshells worrying about offending people. And if you just open it up and make everything non-attributable and just have a, you know, good serious discussion, everybody wins.
Fascinating stuff. I can't believe we're running out of time. Professor Feldkamp at George Mason University. Professor, where can we get more information about you?
I guess go on my LinkedIn page. I wrote a book, Theory and Politics of Terrorism. You can get that on Amazon.com. Just basically a compendium of just basically different types of terrorist organizations and the history of terrorism, or why people resort to terrorism, you know, the media and terrorism, crime and terrorism, religion and terrorism, domestic, international, and environmental terrorism, and then also, you know, how we counteract that.
He's got everything in terrorism.
Yeah, you know, that when you write a book, it's like, okay, let's just get one textbook, because, you know, if you're a professor, you got to do that. You got to write a textbook and then upset all your students because they got to buy it. But, you know, that's what you do. So I just made, you know, one textbook to cover it all.
You did, absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor, for being here. We truly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Glad to help.
We have to have you back, that's for sure. Professor James Feldkamp, everybody at George Mason University. He's a professor of theory and politics of terrorism. Fascinating conversation. He knows what he's talking about.